Hello and welcome to lesson 1 of IELTS Essay Builder. So let's have a look at what we're going to do this week. So today is lesson 1 and it's all about how to write an introduction. So my best advice would be to complete this lesson, and then I'm going to give you a homework task at the end of this lesson. This lesson should take sort of 40-50 minutes, and then the homework task should take you 5 or 10 minutes to do. You should complete that before tomorrow at 1 p.m. because tomorrow at 1 p.m. we're going to give you feedback on your homework task. So we're going to give you feedback at 1 p.m. UK time tomorrow. I'll be doing that live, so you can come along live so that you can interact with me and you can ask me questions. I'll be doing a Q&A session after that, but you don't have to join me live tomorrow because all of the feedback sessions will be recorded for you. Then on Wednesday at 1 p.m. I'll be posting a lesson on main body paragraphs, so that'll be our second main lesson. And then on Thursday I'll be giving live feedback at 1 p.m. Friday at 1 p.m. we'll be doing the last lesson, which will be showing you how to write a conclusion. So over the course of the week we will show you how to write an introduction, a main body paragraph and your conclusion, so the whole task 2 essay. We won't be doing anything on Saturday because most of you have lives and you want to spend time with your friends and family on Saturday. So we'll be doing the live feedback session at 5 p.m. on Friday. Again, great if you can join us live. If you can't join us live, don't worry, I'll keep everything up till the end of the week. So at the end of the week, guys, just to warn you, on Sunday I will be deleting everything. That's not because I'm a horrible person or I'm a really strict teacher or anything like that. It's just because we've been doing this for years and years, and we've noticed that when we put time limits on things, that people tend to do them more. There's far more engagement when there is a time limit. So that's what we'll be doing. A lot of you have been asking me, can you help me with speaking and reading and listening and task 1, and can you correct my essays and all of these different things. For this week, guys, let's just focus on this free course, and then if you want extra help at the end of the week, we can talk about that. Okay, so what are we going to look at today? Today we're going to look at a quick outline of what is happening this week, so we've already done that. Then we're going to look at the question, the type of questions that we're going to be looking at this week. Then we're going to look at how to write an introduction. So we're going to look at how to analyze the question, plan, generate ideas, paraphrase, and the essential elements that you should include in your introduction. So you're going to learn everything you need to know about how to write an introduction, and then you're going to be set a homework task and do the task. Now guys, I know many of you are busy and IELTS is not the most exciting topic in the world, but imagine the difference that it's going to make to your life when you get this score. I work with students every day, and so many students come to me and say, you know, I failed this test 5, 6, 7, 8 times. I'm wasting so much money, I'm wasting so much time, and it's stopping me starting my future life, my life in a different country with a better job and different prospects for me and my family. You will hear me a lot talking about this because it really does mean something to me. It's the reason why we do these things. It's the reason why we help people with this. One of the main ways that you will improve is by doing the things that we teach you this week. So please do look at the homework tasks, complete the homework tasks. They'll only take you 10 or 15 minutes, and then look at the feedback and improve, because all I want, guys, is for you guys to improve and get the scores that you need. Okay, so this week we won't be focusing on every single type of task 2 essay. There's a very obvious reason for that. Is A, we don't have time to look at every single type of essay. If we did that, this lesson would be, 5 or 6 hours long, and I don't think many of you have that amount of time, and I certainly don't have time to be creating lessons that long. And also, if we try to do everything in if I tried to show you how to write introductions for every single type of question in 45 minutes, I wouldn't be able to really teach you properly. So what we're doing is we're going to focus on one type of question to really dive deep into that type of question, because that's how I teach. I don't teach people on a surface level. I teach people how to do things properly or not at all. So there are 5 different types of Task 2 question: opinion questions, discussion questions, causes and solutions or problems and solutions questions. There are different types of advantages and disadvantages questions, and there are double questions. Double questions are, in one task, there are 2 direct questions. And that's what we're going to focus on this week. We're going to only look at double questions. But don't worry too much, guys. The reason why I chose double questions is they translate very well to the other types of questions. So you'll hear me talking a lot about double questions, and you'll hear me talking a lot about this is only for double questions, etc., etc. But a lot of the things that we'll be doing this week will be applicable to all of the different types of questions. For example, in this lesson, we're going to be looking at paraphrasing. You can use that for any different type of question. But what I will do throughout the course is highlight when this is only for double questions and you need to look at other stuff, you need to go deeper on the other types of questions if that's applicable. Okay, so what are double or direct questions? So these are normally 2 questions in one task. So you'll get a background statement and then you'll be asked 2 different questions in the one task. And normally these are both direct questions. They are asking you directly what you think about something. And as I've already mentioned, these questions translate very well to the other types of Task 2 question. So here's an example of a double question. So we have the background statement here. Nowadays, more tasks at home and work are being performed by robots. So this is just giving you the background information. And then these are your 2 direct questions. Why do you think this is happening? Is it a positive or negative development? So we have to answer both of these questions in one essay. And these questions are, I've noticed that they're becoming increasingly more common. I'm not suggesting that you won't get another type of question. You very well might get a discussion question, advantages and disadvantages, opinion question. But I've noticed these getting a little bit more popular. But this doesn't mean you're guaranteed to get this. Please do not think that all you have to do is just study double questions and then you can go and do the test. It's not like that. But they are becoming more popular. Okay, so just to give you an overview before we look at the introduction, before we get into the detail of the introduction, let's look at the overall paragraph structure of double questions. So there are 4 paragraphs. Introduction is your first paragraph. Then your second paragraph, which is your first main body paragraph, is you're going to answer the first question. Then your second main body paragraph, surprise, surprise, answer the second question. And then your last paragraph is going to be your conclusion. So keeping everything as simple and as straightforward as possible, guys. This is something that is really a hallmark of my teaching, or something that I'm known for, something that my VIP students experience a lot, is we take a subject that seems very complicated, seems very complex, and what we do is we simplify it as much as we can. We can't simplify it into, baby steps, 1, 2, 3, ABC. But one of the goals with this course is to show you that many of your issues are related to you overcomplicating things, or maybe you have a teacher who doesn't know how to simplify these things as much as I do. I'm not saying I'm the best teacher in the world or anything like that, but one thing that I am good at is simplifying things. So this means that you will find it easy to understand and easy to do on test day. Okay, so here's what the structure would look like. Introduction. So the introduction is basically, let's break it down into simple language. The introduction is saying to the reader, saying to the examiner, this is what this essay is about, this is what I'm going to talk about. Then your first main body paragraph, here's the answer to the first question. Second main body paragraph, here's the answer to the second question. And then your conclusion is, here's a summary of what I just talked about. So introduction, here's what I'm going to talk about. Main body, here's what I think about these two questions. Conclusion, here's a summary of what I just talked about. And if you break things down in that way and make them simple and easy to understand, they're simpler to do on test day. And that's my goal for you guys this week. Okay, so let's now break down the introduction. Let's think about the different stages of writing an introduction. So the first stage is thinking about the question, analyzing the question, understanding the question. It's impossible to answer a question if you don't understand it. That sounds very, very obvious and very simple, but it's so true. I look at 20, 30, 40, 50 essays some days, and I've been doing that for years. And one of the main problems is not that students don't know how to write, although that is a problem sometimes, but many of your problems stem from the fact that either you don't take enough time to understand the question, or you don't spend enough time, or you don't follow the steps to analyze a question and fully understand it. So once you've done that, then you need to decide your answers. So before you start writing, you need to really have it clear in your mind what you are doing before you start writing. Because if you don't, your essay is going to be a bit of a mess. Then we're going to think of ideas. So we're going to develop our ideas. And you'll notice that these three stages, these are stages without you having a pen or a pencil in your hand. You know, you can have a pen or a pencil in your hand and making little notes, but really this is all just mental process. This is you really just thinking. This is the thinking stage, a stage that many of you neglect because you feel that you're under pressure, you feel that you don't have time, but it's an absolutely crucial, essential stage. Then we start picking up our pencil or pen and start planning. We start writing things down. So we use the structure. We use the paragraph structure, we use the sentence by sentence structure for each part of the essay to take our ideas, the things that we have been thinking about, and putting them down on paper into a plan. And then once we have done that, once we have developed a roadmap for our essay, then we can start writing our introduction. So steps 1 to 4 are before we start writing our essay. And then step 5, once we have a plan, then we can start writing. Okay, so the first stage is question analysis, thinking about the question. The writing test is not just a writing test, it is a thinking and writing test. If you immediately open your paper and start writing immediately because you think that you're going to run out of time, you are going to get in a lot of trouble. You need to dedicate some time at the beginning to think about the question, plan your answer, and then start writing. Think about it this way. If you were going to New York City tomorrow, you're going for a job interview in New York City, and your plane lands, you get to the airport, would you find your destination quicker with Google Maps or without Google Maps? Imagine if you just left the airport and started running towards New York City. Would you get lost pretty quickly? But if you had Google Maps or you had Uber, for example, they'd be able to take you directly to where you need to go pretty quickly. This is the same as someone who doesn't think and doesn't plan versus somebody who does think and does plan. Thinking and planning is like having Google Maps for your IELTS essay. It might sound like a silly analogy, but my students seem to really like that analogy, and it does make sense. So the first stage is understanding what the question is about. That might sound very, very simple, but just think about what the topic is, and then go a little bit deeper and think about what the specific things they want you to talk about within that topic. So for example, you might get a question about the environment. So the topic would be the environment, but then once you look at it deeper, they don't want you to just talk generally about the environment. They might want you to talk about a specific thing related to air pollution, for example. So air pollution would be different from water pollution, for example. So thinking about what the general topic is and then looking a little bit deeper what the specific content is, what they want you to write about. And then looking at the instruction words. What is it that they want you to do? Do they want you to give your opinion? Do they want you to discuss the advantages and disadvantages? Do they want you to talk about problems and solutions? You must do what they ask you to do. So let's look at this question to analyze this question. So if I was analyzing this question, the first thing I would think about is, okay, what topic is this about? Okay, robots, working, okay. So it's generally about technology. But I just don't write everything I know about technology. What I do is I have a look at it. Okay, what are the more specific keywords? Okay, so it's about robotics. Okay, so it's about robotics doing work for humans, basically. So that's what the specific things they want us to talk about. Okay, so I've understood this. Now I need to think about the instruction words. What do they want me to do with this statement? Well, there's two things they want you to do. They want you to answer this question. Why do you think this is happening? So you have to clearly state why you think this is happening. But it doesn't stop there. They want you then to say if you think it's a positive or negative development. So once we've understood the question and we've understood what they want us to do, the first thing that I always get my students to do is to make a decision on their answer. Make a decision about how they're going to answer this question. So how do we do that? So make a decision early on. This will mean you think and you plan clearly. One of the worst things that you can do, guys, is start your essay without having a clear idea about how you're going to answer it. Many of the students that I work with, they email me after their test and they say, oh, I changed my answer halfway through. Like, is that okay? Will I be okay? It's like, no, you've probably failed because you didn't decide early on. You didn't make a concrete plan. You should never start your essay without knowing what to do. It's like, you know, running into New York City without having any idea where you're going. You're going to get pretty lost. And a writing is a reflection of your thinking. So I stole this quote from somebody called Tim Ferriss, who I follow online, and he's a writer, and he said this, and it really resonated with me because the students that I work with who are very confused about what they think about a question always write a very confusing essay. Students who think clearly about what they're going to write a very clear, easy to understand essay. And a huge part of your overall mark is coherence and cohesion and answering the question clearly. So that's very, very important. Here are some things that you should consider when deciding how you should answer. Keep it simple, guys. Do not overcomplicate things. Do not, as I say, your writing is a reflection of your thinking. If you overcomplicate everything and your thoughts are very, very complex, then you're going to write an overly complicated, confusing essay. The simplest, most straightforward answer is the best. One of the things that I find very difficult to convince students of when we start working together is that the simpler you make your essay, the clearer it becomes, the better it becomes, the higher marks you're going to get. Many of my students find that very difficult to accept because when you fail something or when you get a low score, you automatically assume that you need to complicate things or make things more advanced or make things more complex when the opposite is really true. And I guarantee many of you right now are thinking that doesn't make any sense. How could making something simpler get me a higher mark? Guys, I wouldn't lie to you. I gave this advice to my wife when she was doing an IELTS test. I give this advice to all of my VIP students. This really does work. Many of you won't believe me, that's fine. But once you start realizing this, then it is really powerful. It's more powerful than anything else. And also, when you're deciding your answer, write about the things that you can write about. Remember that you're going to have to take these ideas and explain them, support them with examples. Don't try and think of a really complex idea if you can't explain that idea. So if I was deciding my answer for this one, what I would do is I would think, why do you think this is happening? And I would try and think of an idea right now for this one. That's not the one that we really need to worry about. For this one, is it a positive or negative development? This is the one that we really need to decide our answer on pretty quickly. Because if you go into the essay thinking, oh, I don't know if it's positive or negative, or some of it's positive, some of it, you're going to get very confused pretty quickly. For this, is it a positive or negative development? Just pick one. Just pick one. This is positive or this is negative. If you do that, you're making your life so much easier and so much simpler. So pick one side and go with it, and just pick the side that you would find easiest to write about. That's all you have to do. So for me, for example, I think this is positive and I have a really good idea about why I think this is positive and I'm able to support that idea. I would go with that one. Okay, so now we've analysed the question and we've decided our idea. Now we need to think of ideas. You've already primed your brain to think of ideas in a logical way that will lead to clear ideas. So by deciding what you think about these things, by deciding your answer, you've already started on the path to thinking about a clear idea. However, many of you mess up when you get to this stage because you've been taught a technique for thinking of ideas that is completely wrong and is the worst thing that you could ever do. This area is taught incorrectly by 95% of IELTS teachers. Again, I'm not saying I'm the best IELTS teacher in the world, but when I see something in a textbook, I don't take that thing and just automatically teach it to my students. If I see something in a textbook or in a book or a blog or anywhere, I think about it and think, is this actually effective? Is this actually a good way to teach students? And the best example of that is brainstorming. Brainstorming is the worst thing that you could do. Why do most teachers teach brainstorming? Because they just look at a textbook or they just Google how to think of ideas, and 95% of the stuff out there just says brainstorming. Why is brainstorming so bad? Complete waste of time. Brainstorming, you write the thing in the middle of the page and then you draw a bubble around it and then you draw arrows, and you don't have time to do that. You don't have time to think of 16 different ideas. And even if you do think of all of these different ideas, most of them are not specific. They don't answer the question. They're not specific. They're not relevant. So what happens at the end of a brainstorm session is you've got a bunch of ideas that are not specific to the question, not relevant to the question. You've just wasted a huge amount of time, and then you have to waste even more time going through all of these ideas. Stop it. Stop doing brainstorming. It's a really, really bad idea. Instead, we should just keep it simple. The most obvious ideas are normally the best ones. The simplest, most straightforward ideas are the easiest to understand and the easiest to write about. There are no extra marks for amazing ideas. Many of you think that there are, 2 or 3 ideas for each question that get you a band 9 or a band 8. It doesn't work like that. It's not like the examiner has a list of ideas, and if they follow those ideas, they'll automatically get a high score. It doesn't work like that. It works by, are your ideas relevant to the question? Do they answer the question? And how well do you develop and use those ideas? So how can we think of simple, straightforward ideas that we can use in our essay? The answer is the direct method. Ask yourself direct, specific questions about the question being asked. This will generate specific, relevant ideas in a very short amount of time. The first ideas you think of are normally the best. So many of you are very intelligent people, like doctors, engineers, lawyers, and throughout your life, throughout your studies, you have had to think of complex, complicated ideas your whole life. So when you do the IELTS test, you tend to do the same thing. Other people have been taught by teachers that, complex, high-level ideas are a good idea. Many of you just assume that you would get more marks if you think of more complicated ideas. The opposite is true. So what is a good idea? A good idea is easy to understand, it's relevant to the question, answers the specific question, and is easy to explain. It's easy for you to take that idea, bring it into your main body paragraphs, and develop that idea. So many of you are probably thinking, what is this direct method? How do we use it? So let's look at a question. Nowadays, more tasks at home and work are being performed by robots. So the direct method is where you take the question and you ask yourself a direct question to develop an idea. So why do you think this is happening? How would you think of an idea for this? In the most obvious way is you would just think, why is this happening? You would ask yourself that question. So instead of, drawing bubbles and arrows and all of these different mind maps and all of these different things, it's not hard when you just ask yourself the question. For this one, is it a positive or negative development? So let's say we decide that it's positive. How would you use the direct method? You'd very simply say, why is this positive? And instantaneously, your brain should be able to help you think of an idea. If it doesn't, wait, think about it a little bit more. This really does work. And when students start using this, they're like, why did I waste so much time brainstorming? And why did I do that for so long? This is just one example, and you can apply this, keep it simple mentalities, keep it simple methodology to pretty much everything on the IELTS test. And, reading, listening, speaking, writing. When you stop overcomplicating everything, then everything becomes much, much, much easier. I keep saying that IELTS is an easy test, overcomplicated by students. And that's really, really true. So let's just recap what we've done so far. You understand the question first, you've decided how you're going to answer it, and you've thought of relevant main ideas. So as mentioned before, this is just the thinking stage, all right? So it's taken, 30 minutes to get to explain all of this, but you should be doing this in the real test in 1 or 2 minutes. This should be really, really easy for you to do once you practice doing it. You can't just take all this information and automatically start doing it. It's like any skill, you have to practice it, but once you practice doing it in this way, it becomes automatic. Just like riding a bike or tying your shoelaces, it was difficult in the beginning, you had to think about it a lot, but then it becomes automatic. So let me do a quick demo of those 3 stages with this question. So nowadays, more tasks at home and work are being performed by robots. So I would look at this, I would understand it. The words that I've highlighted in red here are the specific keywords. Okay, I know what this is about. Then I'd look at the first question. And what I would do with the first question is understand what it's asking me. I would think about it, I would decide it, and then I would ask myself a direct question, and I would think of an idea. And my idea is advancements in technology. Second question, is it a positive or negative development? I decide, okay, it's positive. Why is it positive? Because it reduces amount of work we have to do. So I did that in 1 minute. In the real test, that would take me 30 seconds to do that. You won't be able to do it in 30 seconds, but many of my students can do that consistently in less than a minute, in less than 2 minutes. Some of them take a bit longer, but I hope that you can see how effective that would be. Imagine opening your paper on exam day and being able to do that in 1 minute, and then you can start your planning. So now let's look at what is an introduction. Okay, so an introduction tells a reader what to expect. All right, always think of the reader. So an introduction is just helping the reader understand what the essay or what the whatever you're writing, that could be, a journal or a dissertation or anything like that. The introduction just helps the reader understand what you're going to write about. And it helps the reader follow the rest of your essay. Again, always think of the reader. Many of you, when you're doing the IELTS test, you're not thinking of the reader at all. You're thinking, how many fancy words can I put in here? How many fancy grammar structures can I put in here? Without really thinking, am I clearly communicating with the reader? Because the main reason why you write anything is to communicate. You communicate with the person reading. And it also helps you get your thoughts in order. So think of it as a mini plan that will help you write a better essay. So people who write very, very clear introductions normally write very, very clear main body paragraphs and conclusions. If I see an introduction, I can pretty much predict what the rest of the essay is going to look like. A very good introduction is a good indicator of what the rest of the essay is going to be like. Don't worry, examiners don't just look at the introduction, they'll always look at everything. But people who write bad introductions normally write bad main body paragraphs and conclusions. People who write very, very good introductions write very good main body paragraphs because it's kind of like a little mini plan. They know exactly what they're going to write about. Also, what is an introduction not? So it's not a chance to show the examiner how amazing your language is. Do not insert lots of fancy words and memorized phrases and all of these different things. If you can use high-level language, be my guest, use it. But if you don't know how to use it, don't stick it into your introduction, because you're starting your essay off in a way that makes it impossible to read, because the examiner has no idea what you're talking about, because the collocations are wrong, the meaning of the word is wrong, the grammar is all wrong. Focus on clarity. It's also not a chance to hook the reader. You do not have to hook the reader. The reader is an IELTS examiner who's being paid to look at your writing. Believe me, they do not need to be hooked, so don't be writing any hooks. It's also not a chance for you to use memorized phrases or proverbs or quotes or anything like that. If you have a teacher who is telling you to memorize proverbs or quotes to put into your introduction or any part of your Task 2 essay, run very, very, very far away from them, because they do not know what they're talking about. So there are 3 elements to a double question introduction. This is something that is specific to double question introductions. If you want help with other introductions, obviously you need to go a little bit farther, and this only applies to double question introductions. So number 1, paraphrase the question statement. And then number 2, briefly answer question 1. Number 3, briefly answer question 2. So they're not 3 separate paragraphs, there are 3 elements. So for a double question, if you do those 3 things and write them clearly so that it's easy to understand, so it helps the reader, you're off to a great start with your essay. So let's start off with how to paraphrase, and then we'll look in more detail at how to briefly answer both questions. So paraphrasing. So paraphrase is you state the same ideas but using different words. So how would you say it in your own words? So when you paraphrase something, it must mean the same, but you're using different words to express the same meaning. And we can do that in many, many, many different ways. I'm going to show you 2 ways. I'm not going to show you 6 or 7 different ways, because we've already been talking for about 35 minutes or something like that, and that would take way too long. So I'm going to show you the 2 most effective ways, or the 2 most common ways. The number 1 way is to use synonyms. So synonyms are words that mean the same but different words. Or we can use this by changing the structure of a sentence. We can flip the clauses around, or both. I'm going to show you how you can combine both to paraphrase effectively. But let's look at some common errors. These are really, 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 really important. Most of you are not paraphrasing effectively because you're doing things that maybe you've been taught incorrectly, or maybe you just have a wrong idea about what paraphrasing is and what it isn't, and the different rules and requirements for IELTS. So the most common problem is people trying to change every single word. Sometimes there will be some words that either are impossible to change. For example, a date, you can't change a date, or a place name or a person's name, you simply can't change those words. Or sometimes you'll get a word that you don't know how to change. So if you see a word and you don't know how to change it, you can either just guess and try your best and 99% sure you're going to make a mistake, or you can repeat that word. There is a huge stigma, incorrect stigma, about repeating words. I don't know where this comes from, but many teachers teach their students that you can never repeat a word. Let's think about how ridiculous that statement is. Think about articles and prepositions. Think about, the word and or the or of. Some teachers teach their students that you can't repeat those words. That's ridiculous. Look at any good writing, and there will be several words that are repeated, maybe even in the first sentence. Also, as we've just mentioned, there are some words, for example, dates, times, place names, company names, people's names, many nouns that you just cannot change. You should vary your language as much as you can to demonstrate to the examiner that you have a wide-ranging vocabulary. That's absolutely true, but many of you actually fail the test because you are so afraid of repeating a word. Many times students have argued with me about this and say, oh, you don't know what you're doing, you repeated a word. Yeah, that's totally normal to repeat a word. The rule is vary your language as much as you can, but not to the detriment of your overall score. Changing words incorrectly. So this comes from people fearing repeating words, so they try and change words as many times as possible, and most of the time when they're doing that, they're doing it incorrectly. So the meaning could be wrong, the collocations could be wrong, the spelling could be wrong, the grammar could be wrong. Don't change a word unless you know how to change it properly, because all of those mistakes add up. If you're making mistakes in most of your sentences, it's impossible to get a 7 or above. Impossible. If you look at the marking criteria. Also, not thinking about grammar. When you change words, it changes the grammar within the sentence, and you need to be aware of that. Again, if most of your sentences have grammar errors in them, it's impossible to get a 7 or above. To get a 7 or above, most of your sentences need to be error-free. No errors in them at all. Think about that for a second. Think about your writing. Do you think that you can produce an essay where the majority of your sentences have no errors in them at all? That's the standard you need to get to. For many of you, it's not that you have problems with vocabulary and grammar, it's because you have been taught silly rules like you cannot ever repeat a word, and that's causing you to get a low score because you're making so many mistakes as a result. So let's think about synonyms. Be very careful here. Your synonyms must match and make sense. Just because they are synonyms does not mean you can automatically use them. So one of the biggest problems when people paraphrase is when they're practicing, especially, they'll see a word, and what they'll do is they'll Google that word or look that word up in an online thesaurus. And when you do that, it will show you, 20 or 50 different synonyms. Now, some of those synonyms you can use, most of them you will not be able to use. Just because a word is a synonym doesn't automatically mean that you can use it when you're paraphrasing. Let's look at an example. So imagine you've seen in a question, rich country. So if you Google rich and look up the synonyms of rich, you might see decadent as a synonym of rich, and it is. Rich and decadent are synonyms. Do they mean the same thing? No, not at all. Someone can be very rich, but they can't be, they're not decadent at the same time. Look up the meaning of those two words and you'll see it means different things. Country and kingdom. So a country, yes, country and kingdom are synonyms. Can you use them when you're paraphrasing? No. Some countries are kingdoms. Most of them aren't. All right, so this is to show you that you can't just look something up and automatically use it as a synonym. Also, when you're in the test and you're thinking of synonyms, don't just write down the very first thing you think of that loosely relates to that word. A more accurate way would be to use synonyms that actually mean the same thing. Rich and wealthy mean the same thing. Country and nation mean the same thing. They're synonyms, they are close synonyms, they're not loose synonyms like these ones, and you can use those, so be very, very careful. Other thing when you're paraphrasing is you can change the structure a little bit. So most of the time what you'll do is there will be 2 or 3 clauses in the background statement, and what you'll do is you'll just flip the clauses around. So the last clause becomes the first clause and the first clause becomes the last clause. But when you do this, be very careful that your new sentence makes sense grammatically. Alright, let's look at an example. So many developed nations have opened their doors to refugees recently. So if we wanted to change the structure, what we do is we just take the second part of this and open their doors to refugees, put this at the beginning, and then many developed nations put this at the end. But when you do this, you have to be aware of grammar, because when you change words around, the grammar changes and you need to be very careful. So I had one student on my VIP course, and when they tried to do this, this is what they wrote. Recently, refugees go to developed nations who open their doors. And I said to them, okay, think about the meaning of this sentence, think about the grammar, and then try to fix it, fix your problems. And they changed it to, recently refugees have been taken in by many developed nations. So when they became aware of the grammar and became aware of meaning, they changed it so that it means that it's grammatically correct. Okay, so an effective way to paraphrase is to use synonyms and combine that with changing the structure slightly. You don't always have to use this, but it is an effective method. Again, there are 4 or 5 other ways that you could do this, and 4 or 5 other ways that you can paraphrase. We don't have time to go into those right now, but let's look at how to do this. So you can combine these 2 techniques to paraphrase effectively. So let's take this question, and I took a real student example from a student who I'm working with at the moment, and let's show you what she wrote. In recent years, refugees have been taken in by many countries in the developed world. So the reason why I've highlighted these 2 is I want to highlight something for you. So when she first sent me this, she made a big error here. She used a different word. She actually used the word fugitive, and I said, okay, so why did you use fugitive? And she said, I looked it up on Google, and I Googled it, and fugitive is a synonym of refugee, and I didn't know any other way to write it. And I said, okay, so you don't know any other way to write it. Fugitive is wrong, so you've just lowered your score. Why not just repeat the word? And she said, oh, you can't repeat the word. You're not allowed to do that. My old teacher told me not to do that. And I said, it's fine. You don't have to change every single word when you're paraphrasing. If there's just one word that you can't change, keep it. You know, it's better to keep it and repeat it than it is to make a big error, because fugitive just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Also, what she did here, she made a mistake here, and I said to her again, why did you make this mistake? And she said, oh, again, I don't want to repeat the word developed. And I said, well, you're not actually repeating it. If you changed it to developed world, you're changing developed nations. So if you think of developed nations as a collocation, as a unit of language, you've changed that collocation to a different collocation, 2 words that work together. So you've repeated the word developed, but you've not actually repeated it because you've combined it with, correctly combined it with world. So that is fine to do that, because you've actually demonstrated to the examiner that you know that developed nations and developed world are the same thing, and they go together and they collocate well together. So in recent years, refugees have been taken in by many countries in the developed world. If we put that together, does it mean the same thing as this? Yes. Is it grammatically correct? Yes. Is it varied as much as we can vary it? Yes. So that's a very good paraphrase that she produced. So let's look at this question. Nowadays, more tasks at home and work are being performed by robots. So here are 2 different ways that you could paraphrase this. Robotics increasingly play a role both in the home and the workplace, and robotics increasingly carry out jobs both in the home and in the workplace. So again, asking yourself these questions. Does this mean the same as this? Yes. Are they grammatically correct? Yes. Have they varied them as much as they can? Yes. Are there some words that they have repeated? Yeah. Home, that's fine. Obviously the is an article, and we can't change, and it's fine just to repeat these words, but we have varied it as much as we can. So if a student wrote this, I'd be very, very happy with this. So next we need to briefly answer each question. So why do you think this is happening? Advancements in technology. Is it a positive or negative development? It's positive because it reduces the amount of work. So this would be the plan. We would be looking at our plan, and then we can write a sentence like this. This is due to advancements in technology, and it should be seen as a positive development because it reduces a person's workload. So we've taken our plan and we've converted our plan into a sentence, and then we can put this all together into a nice introduction. So this is our introduction. The part in red is our paraphrase, and then the part in blue is us answering both of those questions. So this is something you should probably pause, have a look at, think about it, think about how all the different stages, all the different steps that we took brought us to this paragraph, and then think about how easy it would be to start the rest of our essay by following what is in this introduction. And think about how easy it would be for the reader and for yourself to understand what you are going to write, and then what you write in the rest of your essay is going to be very clear and easy to understand. So let's summarize what we did in this lesson. We analyzed the question, we planned our answer, we paraphrased, we briefly answered both questions, and then we put it all together. This is your task, so pause the video and write this down, or pause the video and take a screenshot or whatever. Look at this question, follow the steps outlined in this lesson, and write an introduction. Do not write a full essay, just write an introduction. That's all I want you to do. Post it below this video. So only post tasks below this video. Please don't email it to me. Just post it below the video. Please do not demand that I look at your work individually. There are 15,000 of you guys, so I can't look at everybody individually. But what I will do is I will look at all of them, and I'll create a brand new lesson tomorrow at 1 p.m. You can join me at 1 p.m. and we'll look at all of the common things that you guys did well. We'll look at all of the common things that you didn't do so well, and then you can look at that feedback, apply it to your introduction, and improve. So thank you very much, guys. Hope that I see you again, and hope that you enjoyed that lesson. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Bye-bye.